It wasn't right. It didn't make sense. Stan hadn't made a single move and hadn't laid a single hand on either twin. And Dipper wasn't sure if he was biding his time or leaving something bigger down the line. At the mention of the attic, Dipper had latched onto Mabel to reassure her. Attics weren't good. Attics were punishment. Both twins could still remember being shoved in the dusty prison of an attic, where the dust mites and rats made it all the less bearable. Attics were the place where their foster parents hid them away to keep anyone from seeing the bruises, and the cuts, and the scars. Attics were where unwanted things were left to rot. But somehow, Stan had turned that completely on its head, and Dipper didn't know what to think. They followed, walking up the creaky steps, the duffel swinging lightly with the motion. At the top was a second floor, leading to a closed wooden door. To their right was an enormous window covered with a thick white sheet, bright lights spanning across the splintery floorboards. "It's fine," Dipper whispered upon feeling his sister's nervous tremors. He signed it out, a nonverbal skill acquired from interacting with a deaf kid back in an old home. They'd used it often, especially in the home that hated noises. Mabel sniffed, tears slipping down her cheeks, but she didn't let go of Dipper to wipe them away. Stan swung the door open, moving the twins forward, and Dipper felt stuck in a blur. He clutched Mabel closer, fighting hard not to visibly tremble, scared of what lay before them. But it was indeed just a room, mostly clean, lacking dirt and dust mites, and rats that would nibble at their shoes. A wooden sturdy bed with a mattress, an honest-to-good mattress, and an old cot sat on opposite sides of the room, layered with blankets and faded pillows. In between the furniture sat a desk with a lamp and a few books propped against the wall. The small window let in a substantial amount of light, beams of sun hitting the patterned rug spread out on the floor. An alcove was covered by a mess of sheets, acting as a makeshift curtain, and it led to the conclusion that it was possibly off limits. Terrified and a little confused, the twins exchanged glances. Seconds ticked by, but no one made a move to walk in. They expected it to be a cruel joke played in front of a hidden audience of possible other kids. Maybe the two strangers who'd been waiting by the porch had been in on it. "Ha! You expected this to be your room? Oh no, you're sleeping here, in this tight little space over behind the door. Sorry about the cobwebs, I didn't have time to sweep." But instead, Stan gestured to the room with his cane with an air of indifference. "Well, look alright to you?" Dipper's throat felt dry, and he mustered the courage to slowly nod. Mabel shifted him to lean on her more comfortably. Surely it was an illusion, all a mistake. "Good." Stan made no other move, giving the room a once-over and pointing to various spots as he spoke. "We'll probably put in more furniture soon. Clean up those rafters, but for now, there's your beds. And a couple books Zeus had laying around. Picture novels or something. I'll let you get settled in." Dipper nodded along, his neck beginning to ache. The twins cautiously entered, the floorboards faintly creaking under their footfalls, and Dipper's injured leg bumped against the wood and made a noise he felt far too loud. They moved to the same bed, the one with the mattress, before dropping their bags on top. The duffels sunk into themselves, their meager belongings barely warranting the use of a bag. "I'll be up in a bit." Stan faced away, ready to close the door behind him. "Get settled, I've got some things for you." Dipper froze. Mabel stiffened, and the door shut behind Stan as he left the room. The twins stood in silence for what felt like forever before Dipper let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. Feeling exhausted and emotionally spent, he rubbed his eyes, leaning himself away from his sisters and sinking into the nearby bed. His fingers automatically curled against the bedspread. Mabel looked a bit sick, letting go of his hand with maximum effort, and nearly having to wrench it away from its tense position. As she studied the room, Dipper gathered the remainder of his strength and zipped open his bag as quickly as possible. Gotta break in the new room. He dug through until he found his dagger, the gleaming blade lying in the corner of the bag. It had been covered in a few odd shirts to avoid being seen, and to keep it from cutting its way out. Mabel visibly relaxed, watching and recognizing their common procedure. Dipper scooted towards the wall, trailing his fingers against the grainy planks of the wood. He paused for a second before lifting his dagger and jabbing it against the wall. "Careful," Mabel warned. "I am," Dipper said back, scrawling a crude symbol into the wall. Shavings fluttered down to the bedspread and he hastily wiped it away. He wasn't used to such tough wood. As rickety as the shack looked, he realized it could probably hold up well. He studied the sigil for a second, the shape messy but passable. He gave it one last run through with the blade before falling back in relief. Both twins seemed to release their breath simultaneously. They sat in dreary quietness. Neither twin wanted to speak first, but both knew what subject was inevitable. Really, there was a whole variety of things to discuss. So many, they felt overwhelmed. "Do you like it?" Mabel started first, curling up on the bed as she glanced at her brother, her chest hitching with hidden tears. The dotted sheets contrasted wildly with her dark hoodie, covered in stains that never got out no matter how hard she'd scrubbed. "Like what?" Dipper stared at the ceiling to avoid looking at his twin's eyes. "The room. It's weird. It's so clean. We've never had this clean a room before." "It's a trap," Dipper murmured, turning on his side and staring at one blue dot on the sheet, directly next to his face. "He's gonna want something, you know." "I'm not stupid," Mabel countered snappily. "I know you aren't," Dipper returned. "You're the best sleuthing partner I could ask for." "I'm scared." "Me too." Mabel drew in her arms, letting the sleeves flop over limply. She brought her knees to her chest, converting herself into a small, huddled ball within her hoodie. "How are we going to know what he wants? He didn't even show any signs." "He's a salesman. They're born to act." Dipper felt terrified at the prospect. It hit him like a bag of cement. Stan was going to create a facade neither twin could see through. "Oh man, what are we gonna do?" "Leave." Mabel's tone was insistent and sharp, and she poked a foot in the directions of the duffels. "You always said we could leave. One day, we just gotta make a map." "A map will take weeks," Dipper said, watching his sister's hopeful expression switch to a crestfallen one. "And there's woods. We're in the middle of nowhere." He was frightened by the words coming out of his mouth in an endless stream. "This is the hardest place we've been in." He dropped his eyes to her face and saw her lip tremble. The tears welling in her eyes were enough of a sign. "But we will. This time we will." Dipper clambered up, sitting upright and nearly tipping off the bed as a mattress sunk under his weight. He almost wanted the words, "I promise," to follow, but he never broke a promise, and given the circumstances, the future held only mysteries. He couldn't risk it. "All right. Now repeat after me, Mabel." He grasped her hand, helping her upright and letting her uncurl and stick her arms back through her sleeves. With sad eyes, she directed her gaze to the floor and waited. "We can't trust adults." Dipper's words were steady and determined. It was a genuine feeling, one thing he could pick out from a roller coaster of emotions he went through. "We can't trust any adults," Mabel parroted, her eyes shifting to the closed door. "They're stupid, sadistic bastards who will never help us." Dipper let the spite in his words show. Nothing but hatred was directed towards Stan, their dad, every deadbeat adult who didn't know a damn thing about proper childcare, and kept the cycle going, because adults really were nothing but puzzles. "They're stupid, sadistic dumbheads who will never help us," Mabel replied. "Mabel, that's not what I said." Dipper huffed at the disregard to their oath as she offered a shaky smile. I know, but I don't like those words. Oh, fair enough. Dipper shrugged the matter off, not willing to discourage her. We can't trust anyone. We don't need anyone. Except each other, she recited, now invested into the speech. Because we were born together and we'll die together. Because we always tell the truth. Because I'll always look after you and you'll always look after me. Because we're all we have in this world. Dipper couldn't keep the cheesy grin off his face. Mabel insisted they clap their hands and do the complicated secret handshake to seal a deal, and as they did, Dipper vowed mentally that he'd let the oath ring true. He protected Mabel, taking the beating that ruined his leg. She protected him, keeping a close watch when he was incarcerated and unable to fend for himself those first few days at the damned hospital. And Mabel, well, Mabel was Mabel, deserving as nice of a life as Dipper could give her. She was sweet and caring even after all the hell they'd been through, and she often claimed there was a reason for it. If there's good people like you out in the big world, she stated, then maybe it's not so bad out there. If those people are as great as you, her protective and quiet and scheming brother was all the good she saw in the world. He wasn't anything like her in that regard. There was no good in the world, because Mabel was one of a kind, and no one in the entire universe was like her at all. He was mediocre at best, but had the drive to keep her safe. Mostly, though, he wasn't even normal. He was a monster, and he knew that. Dip, stop that! Dipper blinked, catching Mabel's mild glare of disapproval. You're doing that self-loathing thing again, Dip. Oh. Dipper ducked his head, glancing at the sigil, and swearing to himself the place was secure with the safety it brought. Sorry. It's okay, Mabel beamed, always happy to pull him out of a trance. You need a rest, bro. Get as much as you can. No, I'll keep the first watch. But Dipper trailed off as the telltale sounds of footsteps appeared furtively outside the door. In one fluid motion, he slipped off of the bed as soundlessly as possible. It had to have been Stan. He knew it just had to be Stan. Mabel, Dipper snapped, keeping his eyes trained at the door. Get under the bed and stay there, alright? He took a shaky step forward, the pain in his leg excruciating. Quickly, Dipper, I'm not gonna just leave you. Mabel was showing the start of an argument, but there wasn't time. I can't... Mabel! God damn it! Do what I asked! Dipper snapped, and Mabel reluctantly complied, sliding under the bed and scooting behind the bedspread on her stomach. She disappeared from sight, safe and out of harm's way. Dipper returned his gaze to the door, standing as straight as he could, his arms glued to his side. He tried to level his breathing, knowing if he just listened, Mabel would be fine. He could take whatever Stan dished out, even if it killed him. End Chapter 1.